So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's session with Gary Bostock from Pillar to Post. Gary has been in the inspection business for many, many years, and I've actually had him out to my offices to do presentations like what we're going to see today. Today's presentation is looking at problems in newer homes that are 10 to 20 years old. And believe it or not, there are a lot of problems with homes that we would call our newly built homes. Sometimes that's they're poorly constructed, so they're not as well built as, let's say, homes that are 40, 50 years old. Gary does operate all through the GTA. This is his second session with us. His first was 2 weeks ago on mold. We do have a link to that video for anybody who wants to catch up to that session, which was a brilliant session that you did, Gary. Thank you so much. We've had a lot of positive feedback. So I'll let you take it away today, Gary, and wish you all the best. And everybody have a happy Canada Day tomorrow and a good weekend this weekend as well. All the best, Gary. Take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Just so everyone knows, we do like to start on time, and this will go maybe 35, 40 minutes. If you have any questions, please just text them or put them in the chat box. And then at the end, Matthew will read some of them out and I'll answer whatever questions you guys have. And you can always call me up. So we do have a full series. The one we just did was on mold. This one's going to be on newer homes, like Mike said. Just to give you some quick background, I do have an entire team. I have 2 full-time inspectors besides myself, Mladen and Ian, and my wife, Christine, on the right there. She's the one who usually answers the phones and takes all the bookings. People ask, where do we go? Basically, if you're willing to drive there, so are we. So in a nutshell, hour and a half outside. It's not an issue for us, okay? But I want to get straight into this. Or you'll also see a Q code every so often. If you do like what you hear and you have an inspector that you're happy with, that's great. But you know, if he's not available, we do have the ability to do 6 a day, and we do 7 days a week. Just take a picture of this code. It'll put my details into your phone, and you'll see this every so often. So if you don't catch it right now and you do like what we do, then you can just put it into your phone. So I like this one I'm doing right now on newer homes. It's detailed in the sense it's giving you an overall understanding of components in a home. And the bottom line on all my screens here, to help you serve your clients. I always come back to the point that buyers or sellers have a lot of choices of agents to choose. So you should always be selling yourselves, even though you've got that signed contract saying you're the realtor. You should always be powering home how much you know and showing your knowledge to always reinforce that they pick the right person. So today we're going to be doing characteristics of newer homes, 10 to 15 years. Now, there's not as many 10 to 15 year homes anymore in Toronto, not even that many anymore in Mississauga, because we've built an older space. But if you're taking your clients out to Guelph, out to Cambridge, out to Oakville, Burlington, these places where we are a lot of new homes that are in that 10 to 15 year category right now. These are going to keep you in good standing on this presentation. But again, you've got to put things in perspective to your clients so they know what they're understanding and what they're buying when they're buying a 12 or 15-year-old home. So we'll cover some life cycles, what to expect, and common issues. So life cycles, things wear out, components. So people think, hey, I'm getting a 12-year-old home, I've got no issues. Well, you've got certain components that are 12 years old or 15 years old or 17 years old. And so they have to have an understanding that when you buy a house, you've got to budget for certain expenses as you go forward. Air conditioners, furnaces, shingles, you've got to have the money put aside or have the ability to replace some of these components as you move forward. So some life cycle here is, we're talking a general asphalt shingle. We get 15 to 18 years out of a 25-year shingle. People say, okay, Gary, 25-year shingle, why am I getting 15 or 18 years? Well, if you were to buy a car today and you were looking at the mileage and it says, hey, you get, 32 miles to the gallon on highway and you get 26 gallons driving city. Well, yeah, that's if the wheel's perfect. When the car's in the lab, not going uphill, not stopping and starting at traffic lights. So if we were a couple of hours further down south, we probably would get closer to 25 years on a shingle. But typically a 25-year shingle in Canada, 15 to 18 years, okay? High efficiency furnace, you'll see I've highlighted that 12 to 15. I'll explain why it's 12 to 15 and not 15 plus as we get further into the presentation. We're only going to touch quickly on air conditioners, but I'm going to spend a little bit more time as we go on shingles because it is one of the biggest ticket areas we have. So again, no perfect house. You have to drill this home to your clients. There's always going to be, bits of money to spend there. We'll never do an inspection and not find any deficiencies, but we'll explain to them what these deficiencies are, and they're quite common. And it doesn't matter if I inspect 10 houses for you, probably 80% of the deficiencies I've called out on this house, I would call out on any house I did for you, okay? But we'll explain that to your clients as we go around, okay? But putting things in perspective, that's what's key. So a 10 to 15-year-old home, like I said, buyers think it's new, sellers think they're selling a new home. So we have to look at life cycles of things that are going to potentially cost some money when they purchase the house. So things that will need attention: shingles, air conditioner, furnaces, exterior paint, grading. We're going to cover all these in this section right now. So standard asphalt shingles, as I said, 15 to 18 years. Okay. We're not going to cover clay. We're not going to cover slate. We're not going to cover metal in this one. Okay. We're strictly talking about the majority of shingles that are asphalt. Okay. Also, builders grade shingles. This is key when we start talking about builders grade shingles. Builders grade shingles, 10 to 12 years is what we're going to be looking at on a builders grade shingle. Okay. So we use our drones, me and all my guys, we use high definition drones to do our roofing inspections in most cases. The pictures we get are phenomenal. We can be 100 feet up and we can zoom into a single shingle and literally count the granules on it. It's that good. So we use high def drones on the majority of our roofing inspections if it's available. So we're looking at the granule materials. Are they flat? The spacing between them? And I've got quite a few pictures because I really need to drill this home because it is a big ticket item, okay? So what do we look for? And I usually advise realtors carry a pair of binoculars with them. You can get some, don't have to be too expensive. They don't have to be like, our $500, $800 binoculars. But the type of cash flow that your clients may be going into when they're buying a house. And it's very important because if you're going up to a house and by you doing this seminar, you're getting a better understanding of what shingles should look like, and you see that the shingles are definitely at the end of their life, and they're going to have to replace them that spring or that summer, but they're barely getting enough funds together to do the closing fees, then maybe they're not going to have that $6,000 to do that roof repair. Maybe you can't get that adjusted off the selling price, so then you may have to move on. So you really need to know your client's finances all the way, as far as I'm concerned. We won't get into that. That's not my job. But you really need to have an understanding of what their prices are. So here we can easily see here, we're looking at a brand new shingle here, nice and tight, okay? This is the type of thing we're looking for. And we want them flat. We will always get to the edge of the shingles when possible to see the underlayment, okay? But these are the type of brand new shingles we'll be looking at. So when we start looking at some older shingles, and again, before I get into this, when I was talking about builder's grade shingles, 10 to 12 years on a builder's grade shingle, they don't use the best shingle, okay? So it's not unusual for a house 10 years old for us to do an inspection and say the shingles are at the end of their life. Well, Gary, the house was only built 9 years ago. Don't shoot the messenger. The shingles are aging. They're now going to be unpredictable, okay? So we look at a shingle like this. This is actually over a garage. That's why there's no underlayment. But we can obviously see here, the shingles are nice and flat. So that's a bonus. It's good for us. The shingles are nice and flat, but they're definitely deteriorating. These are at the end of their life. We would be suggesting on a shingle like this that they'd replace in the immediate future. So if I was going to see this, I'd be saying, when do you get the keys? Well, we'll get the keys in September. Then I'd start looking for some pricing to replace your shingles. They'll say, Gary, can we get another year or two? Possibly. 3? Possibly. But when they become end of life, they're unpredictable. And there's very few components you have to preempt changing. And shingles are one of them. Because if you don't, and they fail, and that forces you to change them, well, by them failing, you've now got secondary damages. So now I've got damage in my bedroom ceilings. So now I've got to repair, maybe I have to replace some of the insulation in the attic, I have to do some drywall repairs, all that kind of stuff. So now my price has gone up. So shingles are one of those few components you need to preempt. Now, the biggest wear and tear on shingles, okay, is the sun. So if you know that the house is facing west or south, then those side of the shingles are going to be the worst. So therefore, if you're driving to a house and you see shingles are pretty, not in that great a condition, but you're looking at the shingles that are facing north or east, I can guarantee you when you go around the back of the house, and if you can see the shingles on the south and west sides, they'll be twice as bad, okay? So if you're seeing bad shingles on the north and east side, absolutely they're going to be a lot worse on the south and west, okay? So a picture like this, obviously you can see it breaking away, definitely aged. But when you start seeing moss, that's going to deteriorate. And the reason we get moss, we know if you see something like this, I know that's in a lot of shade. So there's probably a large tree around so that when the shingles are wet, they're not drying out. And if they're not drying out, then we'll get the moss buildup, which will further deteriorate the shingle. And you got to imagine these shingles, believe it or not, just like this, started out like this. I mean, it's pretty, this is how they started out. This is how they start aging. Okay. So once you get an idea and start looking at multiple roofs, and I don't know about yourselves, but I'm doing a lot more walks in my neighborhood since COVID's been on. And I'm always looking at roofs. I mean, it's what I do, and I'm always looking at things that needs to be done and loose siding and all kinds of stuff. But as you start walking around, pay a bit more attention to shingles in your neighborhood. And it won't take you long before you build yourself up a little bit of repertoire of how old and how young shingles are. And it will help you when you're actually showing houses to your clients. So when you're going up there, you're saying, you know what, Bill, just to let you know, it looks like those shingles are aging. So don't be surprised when we get an inspection done that, you may be saying to replace them. Maybe you keep that in mind to maybe after having the inspection, you go back to the sellers and asking for an adjustment. Absolutely. That's not our job. That's your job. But if you got such a super deal on the house, you're not going to go back and ask for anything because you don't want it to for them to turn around and say, well, we had a better offer after we accepted yours. All this stuff comes into play. But it won't take you long to build yourselves up a nice little knowledge base of what shingles should look like and knowing where your clients are and what money they have once they move in. Okay. So as you can see that the separation's opening up. Okay. So this is the type of stuff we're looking for, granular deterioration, okay? Obviously, when we see the moss. This is double shingles. I know people say, well, there's 6 sets there. Well, we double them up on the edges. This is actually shingle on shingles. Just so you know, we should never shingle on top of shingles. We should always remove and put shingles on, okay? If you don't, if you shingle on top of shingles, there's a couple of things that's going to happen. One, your warranty is null and void from the manufacturer. They won't warranty that shingle. Secondly, you're going to knock 1/3 of the life off of that shingle because the shingles, when you lay them on top of shingles, are not going to be as flat. They're not going to dry out the same. Therefore, they'll deteriorate faster. So if you think you were getting 18 years out of that shingle, you're only going to get 12 now. Okay. So don't shingle on top of shingles. Also, for the snow load is calculated on the roof based on 1 set of shingles. Now, doing 2 sets of shingles, and I've seen 3 sets as well, the house isn't going to fall down. But in theory, the snow load was designed and calculated for 1 set of shingles in weight, and the snow load for Southern Ontario or Northern Ontario, it changes based on the snow load. So if you're going to flip, people will often do that just because they want to save the costs of the disposal and the stripping down fees. but for yourselves, do not shingle on top of shingles. Now, I like to spend a bit more time on shingles. So I've spent more on this than I will my other areas, because again, it's one of the bigger ticket areas. Now, when people say how much does it cost, we have a good idea just from our knowledge base how much it costs to replace shingles, and you build that up over time. But if you're dealing with those 3,500, 4,000 square foot homes, just keep in mind, the prettier the home looks, and they've got all the nice peaks and valleys and all that stuff, the more expensive it's going to be. Not just the building material because it's a bigger house, because there's more intersections, more valleys, all this, that, and the other. So when you see a house and it looks really, really pretty, it's going to cost a bit more in your shingle prices, okay? So at the end of the day, if we know something's nearing the end of its life, it's unpredictable. Do you have to resurface it? Maybe, maybe not. But once we see that it's at the end of its life and it's unpredictable, you're really going to have to make that decision. Is it this year? Are you going to push it another year? Are you going to push it 2 years? You can keep pushing it. But again, if it fails, your costs are going to multiply significantly, because now you've got the secondary damages. And that's what I'm really trying to push home here. Okay. Air conditioners, not going to spend a ton of time on. Typically 15 to 18, they'll say, but with us living in Canada, we're in a heating climate, not a cooling climate, which means we heat more months of the year than we cool. Typically air conditioners, 20, 22, 23 years or more. Air conditioners, we get a lot more life out of them, where in furnaces we'll do less. But basically, if the condensator goes, we're replacing it. And again, not a big ticket item. Typically 3,000 installed. It's not a make or break. We will do a temperature drop. And if we think that temperature drop is not within the parameters, we will call it out and say likely needs a service. And that's the compressor if that goes. But like I say, we do a temperature drop. Now, there's no need for us to do a temperature drop on days like today. We walk into a house and it's nice and chilly. We know it's working. We can't test the furnace though, because we can't switch to heat from cooling system. If we see something like this, we will be telling the clients to obviously remove the bushes. You don't want to choke off the air conditioner. It's got to breathe. Obviously, this tells me a lot on this picture anyway, like there's no disconnect box here. So we know this air conditioner is going to be older than 1995, because disconnect boxes were required after that. We've also seen that there's all the lint here. So besides needing to have a cover on it, we know that we've got hot air from the dryer blowing onto the air conditioner. So we'd probably want to cover that up in the winter, just so we're not getting the heat coils freezing. Furnaces, we don't do a lot of conventionals anymore, and there's fewer and fewer mid efficiencies that we're finding. We're mainly dealing with high efficiency furnaces today. As of 2010, we can't do mid efficiencies anymore. So this is a conventional furnace, fires from the bottom, as you can see right down here. Conventional furnaces are pretty hard to kill. They almost go forever, but they're not very economical. Okay, so what happens is we have a heat exchanger. Well, these heat exchangers on the conventional furnaces, and to a certain extent on the mid-efficiency furnaces, the heat exchangers, the steel here is quite thick. So when we're trying to heat up all this surface for the air to blow over it, obviously it's going to take more energy to heat thicker steel than thinner steel. But usually what dictates if we're going to change a furnace is when the heat exchanger cracks. Well, these don't crack very often because they're so thick, but they're not energy efficient. Therefore, we have our high efficiency furnaces. The heat exchangers are very, very, very thin steel. So they heat up very quickly, very economical, but because they're so thin, they do crack. So we only get usually 12 to 15 years out of a furnace. Once this cracks, it's like your engine block cracking in your car, you're replacing the entire thing, okay? And the reason it's a secondary heat exchanger, look at this as it's like a rad on a car. Basically, instead of exhausting hot air, we're saying, hey, why are we exhausting that hot air when there's heat? So we actually put it through a secondary heat exchanger. It hits latent heat, and then it condensates. That's why a high efficiency furnace is called a condensating furnace. That's why it drips out condensation, drips out water. Okay, but the money you save running a high efficiency furnace far outweighs having to replace it every 12 to 15 years. The savings are considerable. But as of 2010 in Canada, there was no more allowed to import mid-efficiency furnaces anymore, and you couldn't manufacture mid-efficiencies anymore. You could only import or manufacture high efficiency. So once mid-efficiencies or conventionals have to be replaced, they must be replaced with high efficiency furnaces. Installed, 4,500 is a good rule of thumb to have, okay? That's a cracked heat exchanger. Now, we can identify a cracked heat exchanger if we can look at the flame and we see the flame yellowing and dancing around, can quite often indicate a cracked heat exchanger. But it's very difficult to inspect the heat exchanger because most of them are in enclosed environments now, and there's almost none of the heat exchanger we can see. Exterior paint, yes, it's cosmetic, people think, but it has a purpose, right? It's a weather protection. So when we're dealing with 10 and 12 and 15-year-old homes, we'll start seeing the paint peel, and we're going to say scrape down, repaint. Any exposed wood is going to be open for wood rot. So, you know, it's not just there to make the house look pretty, okay? It is something that will deteriorate, especially on a thin builder's grade coat. As early as 8-9 years, you'll start seeing the paint flake off, okay? And the reason we're hitting all these points on this is, you know, if someone is buying a 15-year-old home and the air conditioner is 15 years, that's fine, because we're saying we're going to get 20 plus. But likelihoods is the shingles need to be done. So you're talking $6,000, let's say on average, $6,500. And then we've also told them the air conditioning, the furnace is at the end of its life. Now there's another $4,500. Now they're thinking, oh, over 10,000 right now, okay? But a quick story, and I think it's important to explain how you have to put things in parameters. I had a client many years ago called Emil, and as I was driving up to the house, I knew the shingles were at the end of its life, and I knew the shingles had to be done almost right away. So when he gets there, we walk around. I explained to him that the shingles are going to need to be replaced this summer. And we walk around, we get in the house, we sit down at the kitchen table. I'm starting to get ready to do the interior of the house. And I can see he's distressed. I can see that. So I ask him a question, and he says, well, I'm upset about the shingles. And I said, okay. I said, which area? I said, this is the area you want to live. He says, oh yeah. I said, I've got a cousin over here, and I've got another cousin there, and I've got a second cousin here. So I said, so you want to live within what, a mile radius, 2 miles? He says, yeah. I said, okay. So, well, we're in Mississauga, and I can tell you right now, I said, within a mile of this area, you're gonna get a home anywhere from 9 to 15 years. I said, so if you're going to live in this area, you're going to have to deal with the shingles. So it doesn't matter if you get me to do another house 2 months from now, or a month, or a week from now. So then I took him outside and I said, pick another house on the street. And he looks at me and he picked a house. I got my binoculars, said the shingles need to be replaced. There was only one house on the block I could see where the shingles had been replaced. So I said, if this is a sticking point for you, then you've got to buy a house where the shingles have been done, or you're going to have to go to a younger house. I mean, that's your options. So all I was trying to explain to him is, it's not that the realtors found him a crappy house. The area he's living in is in that range of the 9 to 15 year range where things are aging. So it's just putting things in perspective. And sometimes we have to do that. Otherwise, their expectations are too high, right? So exterior paint, grading. A lot of people ignore grading, and you really shouldn't, because the number one question we have as home inspectors, the number one is, Gary, is my basement dry? And I'll say, you know what, I can tell you if it's dry today. that's all I can do. But out of all the choices you have on products that are available to try and keep a basement damp proof, and notice I don't say waterproof. There's no such thing as waterproof in a basement. It's not a submarine. It's not possible. We damp proof, right? But out of all the things, grading is key. If you've got good grading around your home, you're 9/10 on the way to having a dry basement, right? Obviously, we've got weepers and we've got all these extra things, but grading is number one, okay? You're going to have some driveway ruts. You're going to have some sinking around. So the builder never built this house to slope towards the foundation. Originally, it sloped away, but over time, gravity settles it. You got to imagine when we drive by these subdivisions, I mean, there's holes everywhere. I mean, they really excavate. Doesn't matter how much they tamper down that soil, nothing's going to do the work like time and just time, right? It's just going to settle on its own naturally. So you have to regrade. This happens to be a very expensive thing to do because it's labor intensive, and landscaping is one of the most expensive things to do around a home. So if you can do it yourself, backbreaking, but you'll save yourself some money. But you need to constantly regrade until it stops settling, okay? Which is usually the settling stops in around 15 to 18 years, okay? So again, the builder never laid the steps like this, but they all go there because it's settling. So yeah, you have to take them up and you have to redo it. Foundation cracks. I have another seminar that is strictly on basements, on foundations. And I think we're doing that, forget when, I think it's one of the later seminars we're doing, but I do have one strictly on basements that we will cover all this, but I'm going to hit some highlights on this one for you anyway. But we will always have some cracks in a foundation. Poured concrete foundation, I'm not looking at block right now, but in the other seminars I will be covering block and stone and rubble and all that stuff. But on basic poured concrete foundations, we will get some shrinkage. Concrete continues to get harder and harder and harder the older it goes. Anyone who's been to the Hoover Dam is still curing today, okay? But we will get some shrinkage cracks, okay? And not a big deal. Yes, it's a pain in the backside, especially if your basement's finished. But you've got two options. We're either going to excavate, or we're going to, if it's basement's finished, we're going to cut the drywall out and you're going to do an epoxy injection. And yeah, it doesn't look the prettiest, but it works. So now they do a lifetime guarantee on them. They're usually costing around $1,000, and then you've got your additional costs if you have to obviously do any secondary, because of any secondary damages if your basement was finished. But if you don't want to rip your basement out and the leak's not too bad, you can also do it from an exterior. It's a little bit more expensive. They'll dig down 2.5 feet either side, so 5 feet, and do the same thing. But again, we will always see some cracking. It doesn't mean it's leaking. Could be potential, but we need to get on top of the grading. So again, we put all this in perspective for your clients, but that is the #1 question we get is my basement dry? And, you know, listen, any inspections we're doing the next few days is great for us, because if a basement is leaking with all the rain we had yesterday, there's no question we're gonna see it. But if we see staining and it's dry, we'll notice that it's staining, previous staining noted. Dry at the time of inspection, continue to monitor, because it could have been fixed. It could have been a plant there. We don't know 100% of what's going on, but we are very detailed in what we do. We do use our moisture meters on all our inspections. We also have infrared cameras. We have all the toys. But again, we're trying to put the expectations of where your client should be. And we have a lot of people buying from other countries that are not used to basements, right? So as much as our inspections is to find deficiencies, we're always giving your clients an experience on the home, how to keep it updated, why they need to be shutting off the hose bibs in the garage and in the back garden, and why they need to do it, and if it doesn't slope right, to use the bleeder nipple and all that kind of stuff. So we always try and find out the knowledge they have. Have they owned a home before? Have they not? They come from a condo, you know. So, you know, it's we try and give them the overall package. We're not just there to tell them what's wrong. We're trying to give them an understanding and keep up to date and on top of the house. Okay. And when we give them a binder, the binder also gives them a checklist of what they should be doing every spring and every fall, cleaning out gutters and things like this, so they can keep on top of their house. It's like giving your car a 20-point checkup. And again, if we see something like this, the problem may be as easy as they've got a downspout that is dumping water right on the northeast corner. And rather than going into an expensive repair, If we found that was the issue on the exterior, we'd say do that first, do a $10 fix before the extra, cut that out, clean it up, see what's going on. But we don't always jump into the most expensive repair if we've already inspected the exterior and know that we already noticed there was an issue on that corner. Okay. So that's where we'd get into the gutters and the downspouts and the grading, all the stuff we need to check. And all this together will help us have a nice dry basement going forward. So again, all these seminars, it's all about preparing your buyers, adjusting their expectations, okay? I know it's a lot of information. I find this one, I really like this seminar because it just gives you an understanding of components. It's not as detailed as when we were going into the mold or when I start going into some of the older homes and getting into asbestos and knob and tube. This just gives you a nice overall understanding. But you know, you have to help us to help you, that you're adjusting their expectations before the inspection. And I don't mean hitting them with all this stuff all at once, but you spend a lot of time with your clients. You know, well, we used to, I suppose, when we were driving them around before COVID, but you do spend a lot of time with them. So you have to gently explain how a house works and it doesn't look after itself. And yes, it's an expense, just like when you have kids, right? It's an expensive endeavor. It's not just buying the house and saying, thank you very much, and I never have to do another thing, okay? So you have to do this as we keep going. By the way, I like to try and keep my seminars to around the 30, 35 plus Q&As, but I'll stay on as long as you need. I do appreciate your time. I hope everyone has a nice long weekend. And again, we all need to know why we work so hard. Mine's about my toys now. My kids are older. Couldn't afford this when they were younger. But I appreciate everyone's time. Again, there's 3 of us full time. We work like yourselves. We work 7 days a week. We have the ability to do 6 inspections a day. And again, if you need a tight close or a tight option on, you can always call and say, hey, Christine, if I put in a 1-day condition or a 2-day condition, do you think you can fit us in? We'll let you know. But typically we can get you in within 3 days. Next day, all depends. I mean, yesterday, every day this week, besides today, we had 6 inspections. We've got 5 today. And we've already got 2 booked for tomorrow. Yes, Canada Day. We're working Canada Day. It's just the way it is. Some people don't want to take an extra day off, and we're willing to work, and we'll do the inspections. So I'm not sure, Matthew, if there's any questions out there in the chat box.
Thanks. And actually, no questions this time, unless they haven't sent them to me. They've sent them directly to you. Do you by any chance have a blinking light at the bottom of your screen there?
I say chat too, but I don't know what that is. Do I click on that?
That might just be me and you chatting back and forth. But
okay.
if you click on the little chat button, if there's any pending questions directly to you that you can see, or if that's just me and you.
Yeah, that's just me and you, I think.
Okay, so yeah, no questions today. So thank you very much, Gary. That was an excellent presentation.
Okay,
this will be recorded and put on the agent portal. And in the following 2 weeks, so not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after, that presentation will be on the older homes. So we'll make sure we send out reminders for that.
Great. Well, thanks everybody, and have a great Canada Day and long weekend if you're fortunate enough to take Friday off as well.
Thanks very much, Gary. Have yourself a great day.
Okay, bye now.